from a karting weekend to an IndyCar, an IMSA, a NASCAR weekend, from our side, series wide, paddock side, is there one thing or a couple things that we could be doing better from an outsider's perspective?
Access to information is the big one. And I know, Xander, you were working on a media guide for me this weekend. But even if there was just a website with bios of the big drivers, I actually I don't know. You're nuts, Xander. I can't believe you let me do this. But I think I was the play-by-play guy for one of the mini Swift races. And I'm sitting up there just like struggling, like looking at the timing and scoring, trying to get all the names and numbers memorized in my head. So I think that would be the biggest hurdle, I would say, right now for what you guys are doing to take that next step, is to get people familiar with the names and the colors and the chassis manufacturers. I think that's the biggest way to tell the karts apart, is to know the names of the chassis manufacturers. And I still have trouble with that because there's 5 or 6 or 7 of them that are competitive. And then some of the same karts have different colors depending on whether or not it's an independent team. Doing something like what motocross does, I think, would be great if on the board you had a color associated with the manufacturer that the driver's on.
Actually, Dave, to you, exactly what you're thinking is what I've been trying to work on for about the last year in the limited days that we're not streaming or on the road, and try to put together a website for sure. Our kartchaser.com website is going to have, at minimum for X30 and for Shifter, driver bios for everybody with pictures. I think even probably a spotter guide with chassis pictures and manufacturers would probably help. Like you said, the dynamic inside the industry is tough because in the moto world, the manufacturers still help out even the satellite teams financially. So a satellite team won't run a non-KTM kit, for example. The rider might run a blue jersey, but he's still on a orange bike. And we're here only Burrell and CRG and Kart Republic, even from the direct factories over in Europe, and a handful of other manufacturers. We're getting to see more, like Sodi and a few more come this year, which is cool, have a hand in supporting the American teams racing at the American Series. So, like, for Rawlson Performance Group, they are the OTK team, but unfortunately, Tony Kart Factory does not support beyond sending a Vortex motor for Danny Formal in KZ. Mike Rawlson has to run that entire operation off of his own dime. So why would he run the standard Cosmic kit? He runs the Rawlson Performance Group kit. If Tony Kart would see the value in the American racing over here enough to the degree that they would invest in, $100,000, $200,000 budget for the year for Rawlson, then they could say, hey, no more RPG kits, or if it's going to be RPG, it's going to be RPG suits, but it's going to be Tony Kart kits. So that's the one thing that is tough. Like Kyle can attest to. Kyle's also been doing a lot of the colored graphics for the year based off of the drivers, and we're always back and forth on, well, Trinity, for example, do we go green for Trinity Karting Group green, or should we try to narrow down the list of manufacturers and colors and say Trinity's going to be orange, and MPG Motorsports, while it's red and white, should be also orange because it's Kart Republic. But at the same point, like you said, there are so many different lines from a chassis manufacturer factory. I mean, OTK has 7 that are all the same OTK go-kart. By that front, because there's so many different lines from the handful of factories that actually do the tubing process and make the go-karts, we have just as many American individual team outfits as we actually really have chassis lines. So I've been back and forth on that ticker idea of like, well, do I do the teams because those are the actual ones that are spending the money for the most part, or do we do the manufacturers?
Since you brought up the teams, we had 24 X30 Pro drivers. For all intents and purposes, I know there aren't actually 24 teams anymore, but for all intents and purposes, that's a Formula One grid. You could just do it the Formula One style and just have a color for each team. And because Rawlson Performance, I look at those carts and I say pink. That's the color I look at. Mike does a great job of making me know exactly which carts are his on the racetrack. They're the easiest to spot because they've got that bright fluorescent pink on them. And obviously other teams have colors directly associated with them. I don't know what you would be able to do for the privateers. I know there's only a few of them left now in X30 Pro, but I'm sure there aren't that many where you would run out of colors in the rainbow to do that. I just don't know. It's tough. It's a very interesting discussion because I think, Xander, what you're doing right now is kind of changing the way kart racing is presented or the way people are thinking about it, because now things that were previously unseen or or not really thought about, like liveries on go-karts, or the actual uniforms of the drivers, or even the helmet designs. Now guys have to realize, well, I'm going to be seen by 10,000 people on this broadcast. Maybe I should do something a little bit to stand out. The other thing I would say about shifters is you could do it the way other racing series do it, which would be to designate chassis and engine supplier, which is another big point about the shifter carts that I always feel like I miss, because I know that some teams are running different engines, but I can never keep straight which ones are which and which weekend. Because like there was a weekend that I worked where the Magic carts were off a little bit, and then this most recent weekend, all of a sudden AJ Myers just absolutely smacked everybody. So it'd be helpful to know which manufacturers are on the up and up each week, and which ones are kind of falling back through the field. That would be a storyline that, as a pit reporter, it would be fun to follow.